Hi, folks. This is Don Meissner with the North Country Fishing Report. I get certain people telling me that have always fished bass and northerns in our area that they're now getting interested in trout fishing. So I call probably one of the most knowledgeable and probably best trout fishing persons in our area, and that is Aaron Hardy. Aaron is a guide now, and I called him. I said, Aaron, what can you tell me about the trout fishing right now in our area? And he said, well, I got to tell you that what we should be concerned about now is the increase in water temperatures. Now, granted, I talk about how as that water temperature increases, it really increases our chances of having success with most of the fish in our area because they become more active. Their metabolism is really affected by that warm water. But with trout, it's different. They're a cold water species. And he says, maybe it's a time to start shifting our emphasis onto the warm water species. He says, however, the trout fishing has really been great lately. And he said the number one thing to talk about is that they're primarily keying over onto dry flies, and they're still hitting wet flies. Now, if you're using wet flies, these are flies that don't have a lot of hackle on them. They don't float on top of the water. They tend to sink down. And I think it's an easier way to fish. It's how I grew up fishing trout, and it can be a whole lot of fun. But when you're fishing wet flies, you have a whole different presentation. I said, what flies should people look at right now? He says, well, really, let's keep it as simple as we can. And with trout fishing, it's all about matching the hatch. We tend to use that terminology when we talk about bass fishing, getting lures that look like what they'd be eating. But with trout, it is very specific. Whatever we see hatching at that time is what they're eating right now, and they can be very specific. And I says, so what flies would you recommend? He says, well, in keeping it simple, probably anything that represents a mayfly would be great right now. And he says you have to look at the coloration and the size. That's all critical. I look at the flies that I see and I imagine, what size hook am I going to tie that fly on? And he says that might be a 16 or it might be another size. But he says dry fly fishing right now is really super. And I think most people, that's what they think of when they think of fly fishing. They think of that fly floating down the river on the surface and seeing a trout come up and gobble it. It's that visual excitement that comes with fly fishing. The other thing Aaron did say is he said, I really am concentrating on developing areas here where I can take people to fly fish for bass. He says, I think that's one of the most effective ways to catch smallmouth in our area. And he says, he loves to catch them with a fly rod. And here's what I think is really important. Aaron is somebody who could teach any of us how to do this. It's not that difficult. Last time I told you about him having a new client that was a woman that said she wanted to learn to fly fish, and he was able to teach her, and he said a couple of hours she was really catching good fish. So I would recommend for something like this, for any kind of fishing, even though we live here, we might like to have somebody who really understands the wonderful trout fishing that we have to be able to show us and take us. I think back to all the years I was traveling all over this continent, going to wonderful places and doing TV shows on all the great fishing. I will be very truthful here. In almost all of those places that I went, I had no clue about that place or how to catch the fish in that area. I had somebody excellent there to help me, to basically guide me, to help us put a TV show together. And it was because of these people that helped me that I was able to do this for so many years. And I think it's really important. We have to be open-minded and realize that we can always learn from somebody else. Until next time, folks, I hope you all get a chance to do some trout fishing this year. It is getting sort of in the summer when the temperatures are so hot like right now. It's not what we usually think about, but we do have wonderful trout streams and ponds right around the corner, basically, no matter where we live. Until next time, folks, this is Don Meissner with the North Country Fishing Report.